Hey everybody, welcome. I am thrilled because tonight we are going to be talking about Dr. Batsheva's sex points. I know it's backwards, trust me, I know. But we are going to be talking about her new book, Sex Points. And she's a personal friend of mine. She actually did her first ever Instagram Live with me here on I Was Supposed to Have a Baby probably about a year ago. You can find it on our YouTube channel. And we, that she knew that she was writing this book, and she knew that this was something that she wanted to bring the world. She wanted to bring her work to the world. And here she is. Hold on, let me grab her. And she wanted to bring her work to the world beyond her practice, and she wrote this book, and she's here. And so I'm just like, I was just sort of like musing on the fact that look at you, like the woman who said, I don't know how to do Instagram, and I don't know what I'm doing.
And like, you were so supportive. I mean, she like held my hand. She was like, it's okay, Batsheva, you can do this. You really could do it. I felt like old and decrepit and klutzy, and you were amazing. You were so supportive and so amazing.
And now you're doing reels, and now you're doing like all sorts of fun stuff. So it's so great.
Instagramma. That's what I have. Instagramma. Yes.
Totally. Okay. So look, I feel like I don't need you to introduce yourself. I don't know that this audience needs you to do it, but I want you to do it anyway, because like, I feel like your book is really selling who you are. But I mean, how did you get into this? Like, how did you become a sex therapist? Like, that's what, I don't think I've ever asked you that question. So like, that's what I actually want to know. And then like, we'll obviously get into this too.
No, for sure. That is so funny that we never actually talked about that. We didn't. So my original master's was in social work and Jewish studies. I did those two masters. And I was doing Jewish communal work. I was working at Federation. Can you hear me okay? Because I usually wear my earpods and I didn't. Okay.
Totally fine.
Perfect. So I was working at Federation and actually really loved it. Actually, it's so funny. I did an event at Federation today.
Right, I saw.
Yeah, it was hysterical because I was like Old Home Week. And then I started, and then I moved from there. I was working other not-for-profits, and I was getting a little bit bored. And so a urologist who was somebody I knew sort of socially said, could I come help him set up some laboratories, infertility laboratories, actually. And that was 20 years ago. And I knew nothing about infertility. I knew nothing about science. I'm not a science book girl. I'm just not, but I love solving problems and starting new things. And so I said, I was pregnant with number 3, I'll come do it. And then this, I think this is fascinating. Amy, you'll tell me, this is like the world of sexual health according to Batsheva.
Okay.
Viagra hit the market in 1997. So exactly 23 years ago, Viagra hit the market. And there was this huge field of male doctors, or mostly male urologists, and male researchers and pharmaceutical companies who were all racing to solve sexual dysfunction for men. And when Viagra came on, and there was a huge industry. They had all this research going. They had all of these treatments. The doctors were making a fortune. The pharmaceutical companies were making a fortune. When Viagra came on the market, it kind of blew that whole field out of the water, because 70% of the men could get treated with Viagra.
Right.
So all of a sudden, all these researchers and all of these doctors who had been doing, like, making a lot of money, basically.
Yep.
For $85, you could go to your, regular.
Yep.
Pharmacist.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then all of a sudden, it was literally 23 years ago. They looked at each other and they said, oh, well, women, maybe it's not all in women's heads. It was almost like classic, it was like the women as the afterthought. And I was working with him at the time, and I started going to conferences, and I'm like, it is not all in women's heads. Like, there's a lot that's medical going on here. And so I was really fascinated. I went to some conferences. I went back and got training to do intakes so that I could do intakes. We decided to open the Women's Center. And then I went back for my master's in public health and ultimately my PhD as well. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it's a weird trajectory, as often careers are. You know that. I mean, as a doctor who now is doing infertility support, life takes us in funny directions. Yeah.
Totally. Okay. So I guess the question is this book, is this book only for women, or is it for couples? or like who is the audience for this book? I mean, you deal primarily with women, do you not?
Yes. Well, Maze has men and women
Right.
center.
So, yes.
I am I run the whole place, but I'm clinical director of the Women's Center alone. This book is a book for women, any woman, single, married, in a relationship, any woman. And it's not ultimately meant for couples. Like, it's not a couples read. It's not a sex therapy for couples book,
Yep.
but it is chock full of information for women to solve problems. And I have, I was just talking about this today, but it's true. I have a soft spot in my heart for people in monogamous relationships, which most sex therapists do not have a soft spot in their heart for people, I think.
Well, I think my guess is because that's your background. I mean,
well, and I think I value family. I value relationships. There's no question this book is great for a single person as well. But, one of the things is that monogamy is really challenging. I mean, I think we're not honest enough about the fact that monogamy is really challenging, and it's really challenging for women. And I'll talk about that in a second. And
yep.
And I think too many sex therapists are not that interested in talking about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're not that interested. So you have a lot
meaning because you think that if the women in these relationships are not happy, or individual whomever partners are not happy in a relationship, the treatment is then like, well, then find somebody else. Like, is that what you're sort of
alluding to?
Like intimating?
I think that sometimes that is the case, that maybe affairs are not such a big problem. I think that might be the case. Or I think they talk about, well, it's just there's a problem in the relationship if you're not having good sex, right? Like, then we got to fix the relationship. And I'm like, no, inherently in long-term monogamous relationship, sex can be a problem. So we need to get this. So there's a,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting, like,
right,
correct. Yes, correct. Orientation. It's really like the orientation of the way you think about these kinds of relationships. Like, the question is whether you would more want to work and get them through this, as opposed to like, well, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I feel like I feel like it's an integral part of a long-term relationship. I feel like when you don't have sex, some people can survive without sex in a relationship. I know that that's true, but it's few and far between. And I feel like it does long-term have an impact on a relationship in not a great way. And it's really hard for a lot of women, and hard for a lot of men, to be honest, as well. So what I started to say was that I think, one of the things I've been talking about a lot recently is how monogamy, we live in a society where we sort of take it for granted that monogamy is harder for men than it is for women, right? Like, that's sort of the word on the street, right?
That's what everybody tells us. That's what the books and the movies and the society, that's what society tells us. Like, men are meant to be like non-monogamous. Yeah.
Right.
Polygamous.
I think that is absolute poppycock. And I think that the data that is coming out now suggests that monogamy is actually harder for women. They have a much more precipitous drop in desire in a long-term relationship. And what I think happens, is that men sort of are allowed to own the fact that it's hard for them, right? They can kvetch about it. They can joke around about it, maybe flirt a little bit, fantasize. Women, on the other hand, are not allowed to do any of those things or admit that they're ever possibly attracted to somebody else or not so attracted to their current partner. And they're not given any of these like passes to fantasize, complain, address the issue because it's a problem. And so women just shut down. And so then what we find is that then we think, oh, women have low desire. Well, they don't actually have low desire. They may just only have low desire for that lovely guy to whom they are married. That is really, they still kind of want the hot fireman from the, they may not be willing to admit it to themselves because that's so hard for them to admit to themselves. But if they could admit it to themselves, it would be a lot easier to fix the relationship with the lovely guy to whom they are married.
Interesting. So you're saying that, I mean, if I can put words in your mouth, so this book is sort of designed for that monogamous woman who's saying like, yeah, I'm not into this anymore. Like, now what?
Well, part of the book is like
Okay.
part of the book is right. What this book tries to do is break down. It starts with a quiz, and what it tries to do is break down areas of problems with sex. Because I would tell you, Amy, most women feel broken when it comes to sex, and I'd love to hear from the people watching. Everybody who's watching, I'd love to sort of hear from you guys. But you can do thumbs up, you can hearts, whatever. Most women feel like there's something wrong with them. They don't know what's wrong with their sex life. They don't really believe it's going to be helpable, like it could be helped, and they don't want to think about it because it's so painful on some level that they just avoid thinking about it.
Look, we know you and I have had this discussion already twice on this page. We've talked about this already, specifically also in the infertility and loss community and the fertility, anyone who's struggling. I mean, I have multiple highlights on this where people have discussed this before. We'll do it again probably in another few months, but like this is a common theme that I hear over and over and over again, specifically in this community, how much more so in the, community at large.
Which is the common theme that
that they struggle, that the infertility or the pregnancy loss adds this extra layer on top of all of that.
For sure. And it adds a layer on top of the fact that most of us struggle. Like that is just a reality that if we could address it, like your sex life is not going to be super easy all the time. Like somehow we have this fantasy, Amy, that like you get married and you have this relationship and it's good. Hopefully it's good in the beginning. And then it's supposed to just stay exactly like that for like the rest of your life. And that's such an unhealthy fantasy and such an unhelpful fantasy. And one that ends up making us feel broken about ourselves. Like, well, there's something wrong with me because my sex life is bad, or there's something wrong with me because I don't desire my partner and he's lovely and I'm so lucky to be married to him and I don't want to have sex with him, right? So yeah.
I know, I was just going to say, with those words, you have like allowed, like, I don't like whoever many people are watching right now, like all of those people to take this like deep collective sigh of like, okay, thank you.
It's not just me. Like, it's not just, and you're not broken and there's nothing wrong with you. And monogamy is hard and we can make it better. And that is the message of this book but it's not just, I also have tons of single women who have women who have pain. Pain is so freaking mishandled by our medical establishment, and pain
with intercourse, specifically.
Pain with intercourse. I'm sorry. Yep. Yeah. Pain with, I was talking about sex pain. Yes. Pain with intercourse is so mishandled. It's misunderstood. It's mishandled. And women don't ask for help because either they get absurd reactions from their doctors or they just feel like, everybody has the same problem. There must be something. Again, I feel broken. And so there's a whole section on this book on pain, which outlines different kinds of pain you have at different times of your life. And it empowers you, I hope, to be able to talk to a doctor in an educated, articulate way, because guess what? You shouldn't have pain. Pain should not. Right.
Correct. I get this. I get this message. I mean, it's interesting how I think what happens is that people feel comfortable because in this space of I was supposed to have a baby, where people are already talking about intimate details of their lives and often their cycles, which they don't have any discussion with anyone about. I get lots of messages, at least a few times a week, about people talking to me about their sex lives. And one of the common themes that comes up is pain with intercourse. Commonly, very, very commonly. And I refer them all to you.
It's crazy. Oh, thank you. It's crazy. I had somebody call me today who sort of got through anyway, whatever. They got through the gauntlet and I was talking to them and they were like, so, I got married, 8 months ago. And, it really hurt for the first few months. And everybody said that's normal. And I'm like, where did we come up with that idea? Like, it is not normal. Like, yes, maybe the first or second time that you have intercourse, it should be uncomfortable, certainly not extremely painful. And there's help for all these things, but it's so misunderstood by the medical community. And women are so not assertive about saying, I want help. So, I really, really hope the sections on pain in this book, like, give women like this feeling of, oh my God, Batsheva, I finally understand what's going on, and now I can go talk to somebody about it. So I did spend so it's and that could be for single women also who realize that when they try to put a tampon in, they have horrible pain. So I wouldn't say this book is only for people in long-term monogamous relationships, but I think I have a sort of special emphasis on long-term monogamous relationships, with figuring out kind of how to navigate that, and being honest about it is a good starting point for that.
And can you talk a little bit more about, like, you mentioned a few different places, this, like, specifically for this community, right? Like, for the people who are in the trenches, who are, like, one of the most common things I hear about, like, right after pain, is I hear about this pressure to have sex at certain times, especially for individuals who are going through, treatments and need to have timed intercourse, like, and need, like, it's this time and this place and blah, blah. And, like, some of the people in this community also, like, in order to collect a sperm sample, which they can't, like, the men can't just masturbate in the clinic and collect the sample. They have to have intercourse with a special condom, and, like, then the men can't get hard. Like, there are, like, 1,000 things that happen because the pressure is too much. And then there are these, like, oh, well, I guess we've just spent thousands of dollars and now this month is gone, like, because you can't perform. So I'm hearing like a lot of the, like, pressure of the timed intercourse. And I know, like, you talk a lot about, like, the fantasy piece, and the other pieces is to, like, sort of how to try to get yourself in a different place when there's so much pressure put on you. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. I know we've talked about it before, but, like, specifically things that you also discuss in the book.
So let me talk about what I think is probably the most helpful nugget in the entire book, which I'm sure is going to get overlooked by lots of people, but I'm actually putting a guide out for therapists to use this book with their clients, because general therapists do not know how to deal with sexual issues, often don't talk about it, shockingly. But there's one thing in the book which I feel like is maybe like my magic bullet for couples. And we talked about this a little bit the last time we got together. It's what, a lot of sex therapists talk about scheduling sex, Amy, but what I talk about is scheduling not sex. And what I am not talking about is taking sex off the table, because often sex therapists will say, oh, just stop having sex, which is so impractical for the, infertility community. It's ridiculous. But even for the non-infertility community, you just take sex off the table, you're just doing a whole disservice, because you're just removing the problem. You're not actually rejiggering the problem. Anyway. Right. So when I talk about scheduling not sex, what I'm talking about is a different framework, Amy. And I feel like it works in certain situations. Look, the struggles that infertile couples are going through, all the things you just outlined, are so complex, and everybody's so individual, that for me to pretend that there's a magic wand that I have. But I do, no. So I want people who are listening to understand that, right? Like, I get that your problems are unique and complicated. But I will say, one of the things that comes up a lot in general is when the woman, let's assume it's the woman, sometimes it's the man, which has, we'll get back to that if you remind me, where the woman feels this terrible pressure because her partner wants to have sex more than she does, right? So she feels like this general, and it could be because, they have to have sex at a certain schedule, and then he wants to have sex other times, and she feels like, I don't want to deal with it, right? Like, I can't even wrap my head around that. Right. But I often see couples where she comes in, she's usually hysterically crying on some level, because I love this person. This relationship means the world to me, but I don't want to have sex with him. And I feel like he's always, like, pushing for sex. And I feel like I'm, like, always avoiding him. I'm kind of slipping out of his hugs, and I'm, like, pulling away from the embrace, because I never know when it's going to turn into sex. What are you saying?
No, I'm just like, oh, it sounds so hard. Like, I'm just like feeling this, like, angst.
It is terrible. And he's saying, like, and the husband's saying something like, I love her and I want to feel close to her. And I feel like she doesn't even kiss me anymore, and she doesn't even touch me anymore. And, like, we have no intimacy left anymore. And then she says, and legitimately, Amy, like, well, every time I kiss him, he thinks, oh, I guess you may be open to having sex. And so then he makes a move, right? And then she feels like, I can't do this, and then he feels like, well, if I leave her alone, it doesn't, like, that doesn't seem to work. And then if I try to be really sweet and kind, it doesn't seem to work. And if I try to sort of caress her and she's like, I'm always feeling like I'm being manipulated into having, like, there's this whole dance that happens that is so
Sounds
painful
so
to both
hard.
people. It is really hard. And I feel like when there's infertility involved, it just ratchets it all up like 2 levels. So what I suggest to these couples is like, let's take a deep breather, right? And especially for those women who, what I call, have time clocks in their head, like women who feel like, oh my God, it's been like, we had sex, thank God, I don't have to think about it now for 3 days or 4 days or 5 days. And then like, oh my God, it's 6 days, it's 7 days, he's gonna want to have sex again. Like, it's just this terrible dynamic.
It's funny, when you said clock, I was also thinking a biological clock, where like everyone's thinking like, we need to have sex this month, it needs to happen this month, it needs to like, and then like, and what if it's another month and another month and a month? Like, that's what I was thinking. But both, my guess is everything you're saying goes for both clocks.
It's exactly, it's all, we're walking around
Yeah.
these clocks in our head.
Yeah.
And then never ending time, you know.
Yeah.
So what I say to couples is, here's what we're going to do. We're going to schedule when you are going to have sex, and the rest of the time sex is off the table. So it's not that we're taking away sex entirely, right? It's that we're saying, let's just say Saturday nights when Shabbat is out, that's going to be is your sex time. The rest of the time, sex is completely off the table. Now, let me tell you why this works kind of so magically. Because even to the low desire for the woman, I'll say, listen, can you do it once a week? Sometimes we'll schedule it for once every other week, like, you know, something that you feel like you can come at with a good attitude, right? He doesn't have to wine and dine you. He doesn't have to like worry about everything he says to you that day. He doesn't feel like if he said the wrong thing, you're gonna like, yeah, you know, pull away the set. Like, right, exactly. But so you're gonna come, you know, I would use this phrase, "Besever panim yafot," with like a positive attitude, like, this is like a good thing that you're into this. You're going to have sex with your partner, right? And you know about it. So you can prepare yourself, and we can talk about that. You can use all kinds of other things. Some of the things we've talked about, you know, learning to use your erotic part of your brain. And I do feel like that's super important, but we can talk about that. So you come into this situation in a really positive way, and so that he feels good about it. Now, on his part, he knows when and how he's going to have sex. He doesn't have to spend his entire life with his clock ticking since, oh my God, it's been a week. Do you think she'll have sex with me again? Oh my God, am I like, was I kind, like, what, did I do the dishes? Did I not do the dishes? Did I say something that irritated her? So he's like, it's almost like, you know, when you have that chocolate cake sitting on top of the refrigerator and you feel like you never, ever, 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 ever. But if you know you're going to have the chocolate cake, it doesn't yell at you so much.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, okay.
Yes.
So,
no, it's basically, it's like the dieting, the non-dieting, where people say like, don't like save your chocolate for the weekends, have chocolate every single day. And then you take away like whatever power it has over you.
Exactly. And also the feeling like, because when things we can't have start feeling like panicking about it. I feel like that about husbands. The flip side of that is that the rest of the week, she can climb into bed naked, put her arms around him, and snuggle up against his neck, and know that she can do that and be loving, and he isn't going to understand that as being, I want to have sex. So that is, I can't tell you how powerful that is, because all of a sudden, all of the garbage, that's layers and layers of, is she, isn't he, am I, am not, am I ever going to have sex again? I'm never going to have sex again. I haven't had sex again with him in time. You know, like, all of those layers, you know, have sort of been cleaned. Her clock is gone. Like, she doesn't have to think about it. She knows Saturday night they'll have sex. Right now, she can just be loving and kind and happy, and she's crying, and they had a terrible week, and, you know, she got bad news on the infertility front. She can still snuggle up, and he can put his arms around her, and she doesn't have to worry that he's going to translate that as, oh, you know, maybe
now
have sex.
Right. Oh, exactly. Maybe now.
So and so it sounds so simple. It is so powerful, Amy. I can't tell you, and I think that more therapists aren't using this with their clients. I will say 2 things. For it to work, both partners have to be really committed to making it work. Like, both partners have to know that that is going to work. Because, can you please save this live? You can buy the book. Just saying.
Yes. The answer is yes and yes. And as you're talking,
don't you save your lives? You always save your lives.
I do save my lives, but the last one actually did not save. It was like some like technological glitch, and it did not save. So the first one is saved, and it's on YouTube. But I keep talking. I just want to make sure my phone is plugged in, because I see like my battery is going. That was the pause. So just keep talking for 5 seconds.
I will keep talking. You'll hear me. No problem. You'll disappear. I'll be the disappearing Amy. So right. So the reality is that both partners have to be really committed to making this work, because because if at any point it's Saturday night and they're supposed to have sex, and we're seeing Amy's fingers here. If it's Saturday night and you're supposed to have sex, and the woman is like, well, I don't really want to, and she kind of squiggles out of it, then his sense of comfort is gonna go down. And the flip side of that is also the case. If she comes up and kisses him, and all of a sudden he goes, oh, maybe we should have sex tonight.
Oh, right.
Yes, she's gonna be like, okay, I don't trust this. So both people have to really be committed. I always say to the husband, assume, unless she uses the words, I want to have sex again. If she says those words, if she doesn't say those words, she doesn't want to have sex again. You're going to have sex on Saturday night, like you agreed. And you're going to have hopefully good sex because both of you will come into it with a positive attitude. So
you are, that is totally, keep going. 1 second.
It's totally fine. Yeah, I love the hands and everything. It's very cute. So that is, I mean, I think that can be unbelievably powerful and unbelievably helpful for a couple. And I think what it also does, in addition to the fact that it doesn't take away, like, in addition to the fact that it takes the pressure off and it makes now, I also want to say, if she can't have sex at that point for some reason, like, let's say she has strep throat, you know what I mean? Like, she can't have sex, then it's her job to say, honey, I really can't have sex tonight, but we're going to do it on Tuesday morning, right? Like, she's coming in with the absolute clear understanding of when they are going to have sex. Like,
there's a plan. So there's another plan.
And he doesn't have to, like, maneuver it. It's out of his hands. He doesn't have to maneuver it. She is taking ownership of it. So, so I think I feel like that, and especially with couples who are struggling with infertility when things are scheduled, I think being as concrete and as specific and as articulate as you can about when you are having sex and when you're not having sex can be just huge relief to couples. Like, huge. I mean, from your people watching who are in the infertility, like, space going through this, I'd love to hear from you, but I do feel like this can be an incredibly powerful tool, because that hovering of always of like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Should it happen? Am I a bad person because I don't want it to happen? Am I a bad person because I do want it to happen? Like, that is just an extra layer of junk you don't need in your life.
Do you think, I think I know the answer to this before even asking it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think that this concept also works for those who are post-loss? That's the question. This, like, I mean, like we're dealing with, you know, the physical pieces of, you know, the post-hormonal, like, letdown of a pregnancy, coming back to normal, like, whatever a woman is dealing with in terms of, like, her own physicality of losing this child. Like, sometimes there's this urgency of, like, I need to get pregnant again right away, and because I need to hold a baby in my arms, and hopefully they don't have fertility issues. So sometimes there's this urgency, but then other times there's this, like, I can barely get up out of bed, let alone connect. So, like, the question is do you think that this works also for those couples?
So, look, I can't make a blanket statement for everybody, obviously. And I think people have to honor where they are at. I will say that for people who are in mourning for a loss, giving yourself time to be mournful is really important. And as you just described, people mourn very differently, right? Some people want to connect and some people don't want to connect.
Right.
And I think if you decide to take a month or two off of any kind of sexual activity, obviously it's your right. It's your right to take as much time off as you want. But I will say that I think relationships do better and weather better when people can put back some kind of sexual activity on some kind of regular basis. And this kind of allows you to do that in a way that may feel manageable to people. I think that, you know, I often feel like I'm defending the husbands, because I feel like sometimes women will say, oh, he wants to have sex no matter what, right? Like, that's like, it doesn't matter what's going on, he wants to have sex. And I will say that I feel like what I hear from the men is that they really connect from the sex. You know, not to overgeneralize, but we women, we tend to talk a lot with each other, and our bonding happens over verbal communication. And with men, you'll often find that when they're getting together with their friends, they're bowling or they're playing basketball or they're doing fishing, like, they do things, right? Men tend to bond more by doing things. And so the men my experience is that the men want to be with, look, they could, let's be honest here, they could masturbate. It's easier, it's quicker. It was all about the orgasm. They don't need the women for that. But this is the way they connect to their wives. Like, this is my experience. And they feel a tremendous sense of loss also. when they're not having sex with their wives on some kind of regular basis, and they feel like they really miss it, and they feel like they miss the connection. For them, it is the connection. So,
right. And especially also in the Orthodox community, when masturbation is very much looked down upon, if not, I mean, look, I mean,
yeah.
it is prohibited, but you know, we're not talking about what individual people do, but it is something that's prohibited. So it's not even an option for people in terms of their own physical release.
No, that is true. Right, right. Well, we can get into a whole
Right.
conversation about that.
Right.
But yeah.
I know there's 1,000 other conversations to be had about that. I'm specifically leaving them off.
No. So I'm assuming, but I still feel like the men that I have talked to want to have sex with their wives because for them it's a deep connection. It's not just getting off. Do you know what I mean? Like, and sometimes for women it's easier to understand that, like to understand the impulse when they realize that that's what's going on. But I do think that sex, just in general, sex makes life better for couples. Like when the sex is good, like I often will, I have patients who've said this to me in so many variations, Amy, but it's so funny how similar the story is. They'll say something like, if I come home and I see his socks on the floor and we've had good sex recently, I'll scoop them up and I'll dump them in the hamper and I'll laugh. But if I come home and the socks are on the floor and we haven't had sex in a while, I just want to take those socks and I want to stuff them down his throat, right? Like sex is hysterical. Like, right?
It's hysterical. Right? Totally hysterical.
There's something about sex as being the connector. It's different than being a roommate. It's what makes you different than being a roommate. And which is why I feel so passionately, like I'm always joking around, like I'm not that interested in body part A going into body part B. I mean, there's a limited amount of interest to me about that. I'm interested in the reality of what happens in a relationship when you put sex in or you take sex out. And relationships seem to do better, generally speaking, when there is regular ongoing sex. It doesn't have to be fabulous, hanging from the chandeliers, but regular ongoing sex really helps a relationship. And I feel like that's true even more so when you're going through infertility and when you're going through like a loss of some sort. Like you don't want to like pull apart at those moments. You really want to like pull together if humanly possible. So, I do think this technique could be really, really helpful. And even if you use pieces of it and you talk about it, you talk about what that schedule is going to look like, where your boundaries are going to be, what the expectations are going to be, some kind of expectations where you know that there is a certain amount of sex and there's times when there is no sex. And I just feel like it takes off those layers and layers of indecision and confusion and, you know, double guessing yourself and feeling crappy about yourself. Like all of those things, if we can get rid of those, then it makes the sex so much more pleasurable.
Incredible. Look, Batsheva, I'm so grateful for one, your friendship, for your professionalism, for your, like, do you know that the first time that you came on Alive with me, the comments I got afterwards were, I cannot believe that there are two Orthodox women who are talking about sex in a public manner and I'm able to watch it. Like, those were the comments over, like I got so many of those comments. And like, while this specific space is not a sex space, there is so much, I mean, you need to have sex in order to have a baby, or if you can't have sex to have a baby for 1,000 reasons, then that also becomes an issue. And so these two areas are intimately intertwined. And I'm so grateful that like this community has you as someone who they can go to deal with these issues because they're so important and so many people struggle with them. So I'm so grateful.
And they weave in and out of everybody's life. So
yes.
So we could stop here if you want. We could talk a little bit about fantasies if you want to spend a few more minutes, because I think that's important, or we could take a
okay. So if you think it's important and you think that this will be helpful for my community, I leave this to you. So
okay,
let's do it.
So I'm going to spend, I feel like it's important because I feel like, especially when you're going through infertility or loss, when you kind of feel like the last thing I want to think about is sex, like that is just, and the truth is we all have it a little bit. We all have it at different times. And we talked about it. It's really hard when you're with the same partner. One of the things that I talk about in the book, but I sort of have come to appreciate in a really powerful way, is the neuroplasticity. The fact that your brain actually grows and changes depending on how you use it, and how quick women are to shut down their fantasy life, and how central and pivotal that fantasy life is in order to maintain a good sex life. So I think what happens is women feel really guilty about their fantasies. They feel like they shouldn't be fantasizing about anybody but their partner, right? Which we could have a whole conversation about. You know, the Duke from Bridgerton, I have to say, I got lots of DMs about the Duke from Bridgerton. I know who else. I'm going to see a lot of hearts here because did you watch Bridgerton, Amy?
Oh, yes, I did.
Okay, there you go. And people were watching with their parters.
I was like,
you know,
how? It's like a cultural phenomenon. Like, how could I not watch
totally.
Bridgerton?
And it was complete eye candy. Everything about that was eye candy, right?
Totally.
The clothes, the flowers, the Duke, everything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, but the reality is your fantasy, if you stop using the erotic part of your brain, it just stops being able to function. It's kind of like not losing a language, right? So what we understand about brains right now, I used to get it kind of like I would have my, clients read erotic stories or listen to erotic stories, sometimes watch, but women I feel like do better with, audio stuff. And it seemed like it got women kind of back into the mood of being able to, are you okay?
Yeah, no, there might be someone who might be passing behind me, so I was gonna
I love your lives because they're
okay.
really live.
Okay.
Like, should nobody went by. Okay. So,
okay. Keep going.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. It's hysterical. So
welcome to my life.
Yes, it's great. So what happens when you stop allowing yourself to fantasize is that whole part of your brain starts to basically shut down. And we now know that the brain can kind of regenerate, that it gets more neurotransmitters, that there's more blood flow in the area, right. that synapses.
Look, I mean, what you're saying, I mean, is based on like all sorts of like neurobiological research, which says like as you get older, like keep doing crossword puzzles and keep taking on new skills and like this is all the same kind of stuff. So you're saying the same thing applies here.
To 100%. If you stop fantasizing or you start shutting down your fantasies, you're not going to be able to call on them when you need them. And you need your fantasies. If you want to maintain a long-term healthy sex life, you darn well need your fantasies, because nobody in their right mind is going to say, look, really and truly, you're going to be imagining your husband in this bed for 50 years. Like it's just not the way our erotic brains work. And if you feel guilty about thinking about the Duke from Bridgerton, if you feel guilty about it, see, Amy feels really guilty.
Keep going.
About it. If you feel guilty
yes, I feel guilty about it. I do
exactly.
not.
If you feel guilty about fantasizing about the Duke, just know that any fantasizing you're doing is all coming home to your partner. Like you are only using that in service of your current relationship, right? And that is so powerful and can sit, and can really live with you and be, it can serve you in really good stead for many, many years. And it's a skill you need to have, and women have let their brain atrophy. I don't let their erotic brain atrophy. I really think that that's a good way to describe it. And so
No, I mean, I guess my question is there, I mean, look, we're not having a Jewish law discussion here, but is there, but I'm going to bring it up because I have to. Like, is there some sort of rule? Is there some sort of halacha that says that you're not allowed to fantasy?
No, well, I'll tell you what there is halacha. And anybody who wants to explore this more, the Joy of Text that I do with Rabbi Dov Linzer, right? The Joy of Text, we go into all this stuff. We're getting hearts on the law or the hearts on the, I don't know. Anyway, yes. So there is a Gemara that talks about you're not allowed to use somebody else as a stand-in for your wife, right? So I mean, you're not allowed to use your wife as a stand-in for somebody else. So if you really want to have sex with the next door neighbor and you're pretending your wife is the next door neighbor, because that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to have sex that way. You're not allowed to have sex if you're drunk. You're not allowed to have sex if you're angry, right? So you're not allowed to use the, okay. But I'm not talking about using your wife as a stand-in for your next door neighbor. I'm talking about using your next door neighbor in service of your wife. Right? Think about that flip, right?
You're flipping it. You're flipping it.
And there's that famous Rav Yochanan, I think it was Rav Yochanan, I don't remember, who stood outside the mikvah and when women left. And the idea was if they thought of Rav Yochanan, I think it was Rav Yochanan, but I don't remember, when they were having sex with their husbands, they would have beautiful children. Right? So the Gemara.
Okay. I know, right. I think it was Rav Yochanan. He was very handsome. Yes. Okay. I remember. I think it was him.
Duke.
Yes. Yeah.
He was the Duke. Right.
Yeah.
So the Gemara is very well aware of the fact that, people fantasize. What the Gemara doesn't want you to do is use your wife or use your husband, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about your commitment to this relationship and keeping this commitment relationship alive. So when I talk about fantasies, look, I will say, Amy, if somebody says to me, I have this person at work that I'm madly in love with, and every single time I have sex with my husband, I just keep thinking about this guy at work, I'd say, okay, that's an issue. We need to talk about it. But if you tell me that, you know, Keanu Reeves jumps into your fantasies, you think about Keanu Reeves, and then you don't really want to have sex with Keanu
Movie
Reeves.
star. For everyone else who doesn't know, Keanu Reeves, a movie star. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Or the Duke from Bridgerton. You don't really, or Rav Yochanan for that matter.
Right.
You don't really want to have sex with him. You love this person who you are married to. You want to have sex with this person. But your erotic brain just needs to be allowed to run free sometimes so that you can have good sex with this person. And so it is Rav Yochanan. Oh, thank you so much, Clara. That was so helpful. I thought it was Rav Yochanan. Anyway, so I need to do that before we end. I want to say, especially for those of you who are going through infertility treatments, it is an issue. It is the issue that many of us face. You just face sort of bigger for a while, and for those times, you know, scheduling, not scheduling, and using your fantasy life, I think those things will really, really serve you in good stead.
Incredible, and you guys need to buy the book.
And please buy the book and put reviews on Amazon. I could use some reviews on Amazon. I had the New York Times review that book. I'm very excited. I don't know if you saw that.
Amazing. I didn't.
Yes.
Amazing.
It looks like NPR might be covering it too. So I'm
amazing.
Like, I'm a happy person. Anyway.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing me onto Instagram, the world of Instagram. Thank you for taking me on live for the first time.
I did not bring you here. You were here. I just helped take your hands a little bit. You were here already.
Okay, I was sitting on the floor and you were like, here, I'm gonna give you a hand. But I have one big question before we hang up here.
Okay.
How's your hula hooping going?
Oh gosh. Okay, guys. So over the summer I was hula hooping because we were actually renting a house for a little while, and they had hula hoops, which I do not have in my own home. And so I was like getting better at hula hooping, but I now, like, we didn't bring them home. They weren't ours. So, and I forgot to buy one. So yes. Okay, fine.
You're going to meet me in my backyard.
Yes. I'm
vaccinated, and because I finally learned how to hula hoop. It took me a whole year, Amy, and I can now hula hoop. I'm so excited.
Okay,
59 years old and I can hula hoop. I think it's like so important. It's back to those neurons in the brain, like getting something going. So yes.
Yes, absolutely. We live like 2 blocks away from each other. So that's why she's saying that we should meet in the backyard. I'm also vaccinated. We will do this at some, maybe Chol Hamoed.
You got it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Again, Sex Points, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you know, wherever it's there. Yes. Yes. Okay. It's there. Please go buy the book. Good night, everybody. Mwah. Good night.
Good night.